He was the face millions of Americans saw every week on their black and white televisions, the quiet, loyal, and brave companion to the Lone Ranger. To the world, he was Tonto, the noble Native American sidekick who rode faithfully beside the masked hero, fighting injustice across the Old West. But behind that famous character, behind the carefully crafted image of loyalty and wisdom, was a man whose true story has been buried under decades of Hollywood myths. This is the real story of Jay Silverheels, a man of talent, pride, and resilience, whose life journey reveals both the beauty and the pain of being an indigenous actor in mid-century America. Jay Silverheels was born Harold J. Smith on May 26, 1912, on the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve, located near Brantford, Ontario, Canada. He grew up among the Mohawk people, surrounded by strong family ties and traditional values that emphasized respect, courage, and community. Life on the reserve wasn't easy. Opportunities were few, and the world outside often looked down upon indigenous people. But even as a boy, Jay had something that set him apart: drive. He was strong, fast, and fiercely determined. From a young age, Jay found his passion in sports, particularly in lacrosse, a game with deep spiritual and cultural roots among Native communities. It wasn't just a pastime. It was a test of skill, endurance, and teamwork. Jay excelled at it. His speed and agility earned him the nickname Silverheels, because when he played, his feet moved so fast they seemed to flash like silver. It was a name that stuck with him, one that would later become his identity on the silver screen. In addition to lacrosse, Jay was a capable boxer, competing in tournaments and even earning recognition in New York's Golden Gloves competition. To his people, he was a symbol of pride, a young Mohawk man breaking boundaries in the world of sport. But fate had other plans for Jay Silverheels. During one of his lacrosse tours in the United States in the 1930s, his athletic build and striking looks caught the attention of Hollywood scouts and actors who saw potential in him. It was a time when Westerns dominated the movie industry, and producers were constantly searching for men who looked authentic enough to play Native American characters. Jay, with his tall frame, sharp features, and dignified presence, fit their expectations perfectly. He started small, working as a stuntman, then as an extra, often in uncredited roles. Hollywood in those days wasn't kind to indigenous performers. They were often cast in stereotypical parts: the silent warrior, the savage enemy, or the loyal helper. But Jay persevered, learning the ways of the film industry and finding opportunities wherever he could. He adopted the stage name Jay Silverheels, a tribute to his lacrosse days, but also a name that set him apart in a sea of forgettable faces. Slowly, he began to make his mark in small roles in westerns and adventure films throughout the 1940s. Then, in 1949, everything changed. Jay was cast as Tonto in the Lone Ranger television series. The show, which quickly became one of the most popular programs of its time, followed the adventures of a masked hero and his Native American companion as they brought justice to the frontier. Jay's portrayal of Tonto turned him into a household name. Week after week, audiences across America watched him ride his horse Scout, calling out to his partner, Kemosabe, a term that became iconic. Tonto was written as loyal, brave, and wise, traits that resonated with viewers. But to many Native Americans, the character was also a double-edged sword. On one hand, Jay Silverheels was one of the only indigenous actors on television, giving representation to a people largely ignored or misrepresented by Hollywood. On the other hand, Tonto's character often reflected the limited stereotypical vision that white producers held of Native Americans: noble, but always secondary. Jay himself was aware of this. He once joked in an interview, "Tonto means stupid in Spanish. That right?" It was his subtle way of showing that he understood the contradictions of his fame. Despite these complexities, Jay poured his heart into the role. He carried himself with dignity and professionalism, always ensuring that Tonto was portrayed with respect. For millions of children growing up in the 1950s, Tonto was a hero, a man of integrity and courage who stood by his friend through thick and thin. The chemistry between Jay Silverheels and Clayton Moore, who played the Lone Ranger, was genuine. Off-screen, the two men became close friends, often appearing together at public events and charity functions long after the show ended. Yet when the Lone Ranger concluded in 1957, Jay faced a harsh reality. Hollywood had typecast him. No matter how talented or articulate he was, producers saw him only as Tonto. Roles for Native American actors were scarce, and when they did exist, they were often shallow caricatures. Jay struggled to find meaningful work, forced to take smaller roles or appear in low-budget westerns just to make ends meet. At times, he worked as a salesman to support his family. Still, he refused to fade into obscurity. Jay Silverheels believed deeply in his culture, his people, and his craft. In the 1960s, he used his fame to advocate for greater Native American representation in the entertainment industry. He co-founded the Indian Actors Workshop in Los Angeles, a pioneering effort to help indigenous actors receive training and gain fair opportunities in film and television. It was an act of courage and foresight. In an era long before diversity and inclusion became popular talking points, Jay was already pushing for equality and authenticity. Outside of acting, Jay had a softer, more reflective side. He was a poet who wrote about his life, his heritage, and the challenges of being caught between two worlds, the Hollywood fantasy and the reality of indigenous identity. He also had a deep love for horses. After years of working in front of the camera, he devoted much of his time to horse breeding and racing, finding peace and purpose in the quiet rhythm of life on his ranch. Jay Silverheels was also a devoted family man. He married and had 6 children, 2 sons and 4 daughters, and was known for his kindness and humor at home. Though he had found fame in Hollywood, he never forgot his roots. He often spoke proudly of his Mohawk heritage and made efforts to reconnect with his community in Canada. For him, identity was not something to hide or change to fit in. It was something to honor. In his later years, Jay faced health challenges. In 1976, he suffered a stroke that affected his ability to speak and move. For a man once so strong, so full of life, it was a difficult blow. But even in illness, he remained dignified and humble. On March 5, 1980, Jay Silverheels passed away in Calabasas, California, at the age of 67. His ashes were returned to his homeland, the Six Nations Reserve, bringing his journey full circle, from a young boy on the reservation to a Hollywood icon who never forgot where he came from. Jay's passing was mourned by fans around the world, and over time, people began to recognize just how much he had accomplished against the odds. He was posthumously honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and later inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers. Yet beyond the awards, his true legacy lies in what he represented. Jay Silverheels was one of the first indigenous actors to achieve mainstream fame in American television. He opened doors that others would later walk through. Actors like Wes Studi, Graham Greene, and Tonto Cardinal, who all followed in his footsteps to bring authentic indigenous stories to the screen. Today, Jay Silverheels' story carries powerful lessons about resilience, representation, and the complexities of fame. He lived in a time when Hollywood was still trapped in outdated stereotypes, yet he used his limited platform to challenge and change perceptions. He turned a role that could have been a mere caricature into something more, a symbol of strength and quiet dignity. For many indigenous viewers, seeing Tonto was the first time they saw someone like themselves on television, and while the character wasn't perfect, Jay's portrayal gave it heart and humanity. The truth of Jay Silverheels is not just about his career, but about his courage. He faced racism, typecasting, and the narrow expectations of a system that didn't know what to do with someone like him. But through it all, he remained proud of who he was. He never let Hollywood erase his identity. Instead, he found ways to give back and to teach, to mentor, and to inspire. His story reminds us that representation is not just about visibility. It's about authenticity and respect. Even decades after his death, Jay Silverheels continues to be a figure of respect and admiration among indigenous communities and classic film fans alike. When modern viewers revisit The Lone Ranger, they often see more than just a television show. They see the story of a man navigating a difficult industry, bringing grace and humanity to a role that could have easily been dismissed as a stereotype. So, when we look back at Tonto, it's important to look beyond the buckskin and the catchphrases. Behind that character was a man who broke barriers, who carried the hopes of his people into the heart of Hollywood, and who never stopped believing in a better future for indigenous representation in the arts. Jay Silverheels was more than Tonto. He was a trailblazer, a poet, a father, and a fighter, a man who turned adversity into legacy. And now, as the truth of Jay Silverheels comes to light, The world finally sees him for who he truly was. Not just a sidekick in a mask and saddle, but a hero in his own right. A man who rode with pride both on screen and off, and whose spirit still gallops across the landscape.